Okay, the next item of business is a debate on motion 20414 in the name of Sarah Boyack on the Wellbeing and Sustainable Development Scotland Bill at Stage 1. I'd invite members wishing to participate in the debate to press the request to speak buttons now or as soon as possible. And I call on Sarah Boyack, the member in charge, to speak to and move the motion in 6 minutes. Ms Boyack.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This has been a long journey. I want to thank the committee, the clerks and all the stakeholders who contributed to the consultation the committee conducted in advance of today's debate, to those who have worked with me over the past few years to get to this point, and to the fantastic Non-Government Bills Unit team, without whose support I would not be here today. I started work on my bill in 2021. Support for legislation on wellbeing and sustainable development with clear definitions, a public duty, the need for a commissioner to deliver accountability, guidance, advice and hold the government and public sector bodies to account were included not just in Scottish Labour manifesto, but other parties signed up to a wellbeing and sustainable development bill too. I held several roundtables with stakeholders to ensure that I understood the views of key stakeholders. My consultation received overwhelmingly positive support for a public duty, a clear definition and the establishment of a commissioner to provide advice, guidance and critically to have investigatory powers which are referenced in the committee's report. And when the Scottish Government announced its intention to bring forward its own bill and initiated its consultation, I was on the one hand disappointed, as it meant that if the Scottish Government progressed their bill, then my bill would have to stop. But I remembered the 2009 Climate Act, when I was able to persuade the then Deputy First Minister to include the proposal in my draft Members' Bill that all new housing developments would have to have some form of renewables. That was successful. And I also thought it would let me feed into the incredibly invaluable insights that people had raised with me, such as procurement that weren't in my draft, and how to get a joined-up approach that would link wellbeing and sustainable development directly to the National Performance Framework, to hold it to account, to make sure it was effectively implemented, and with clarity in the definitions of wellbeing and sustainable development, which we have had on a number of pieces of legislation.
The member take an intervention.
If it's brief, do I get my time back?
You will get your time back, Ms Boyack. Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful for the members for taking an intervention. And in fact, the proposals that are contained in her bill are in fact the final, I was going to say jigsaw piece, but actually it's the final frame that sits around so many important strategies that are being sought and pursued in Scotland. And indeed, the comment she made about her previous achievement is reflected in all of the new housing that now has solar panels on the roof.
Sarah Boyack.
I thank the member for that acknowledgement. Definitely a practical way to create jobs, lower bills and deliver on climate ambitions. What I was going to say, though, was that I didn't anticipate the SPCB appointed commissioners review and the conclusions that came to. And from the start, I've been absolutely clear that my proposals for a commissioner were not about appointing an advocacy commissioner. There was strong support both in responses to my and the Scottish Government's consultation for somebody who was independent, able to provide guidance to help implement wellbeing and sustainable development principles, and crucially, to have the investigatory powers that would be used to hold public sector bodies to account. And the view of many stakeholders is that our Parliament needs this capacity to make sure this actually happens. The work of our committees is vital, but as colleagues need to reflect, we have a challenge on the capacity of our committees to carry out the work that was called for in the 2021 election. And it also begs the question as to whether the Scottish Government has been performing that oversight role effectively to date, especially given the failure of the National Performance Framework to deliver as intended. Now, the SDGs are meant to be delivered by 2030. There's a real danger that short-termism and the lack of joined-up thinking needed to push wellbeing and sustainable development up the agenda will mean we miss out on the investment we need now to support future generations. But we've got the experience in Wales, legislation past a decade, now being served by their second Future Generations Commissioner, and it's inspiring to hear about the success of their work, re the culture shift they've delivered and their 5 ways of working. What I also didn't anticipate was when the Scottish Government decided not to proceed with their bill, Although I was absolutely delighted that the Deputy First Minister said she'd be prepared to work with me constructively on relation to my bill, when the Minister said he was not going to support my bill, I was deeply disappointed. So, we're here today following the extensive work of the Social Justice Social Security Committee's consideration of the proposals in my bill. And notwithstanding my disappointment, there are some incredibly helpful recommendations in their report, which I hope the Scottish Government will respond to positively and with clarity. The committee recognises the importance of policy coherence, and my view is that guidance is needed to embed wellbeing and sustainable development in policy making. The committee also questions the Scottish Government on oversight and the measurement of the implementation of national outcomes. And I thought it was significant that the committee specifically asked the Scottish Government to clarify if there was not to be a commissioner, then who will provide guidance, support and oversight. And there really wasn't a clear answer in the Minister's response to the committee. The committee noted the evidence that in the absence of clear statutory directives linked to a shared long-term national vision, there is no accountability. So if the Scottish Government won't back my bill, will it consider strengthening the duties of the Community Empowerment Scotland Act 2015? As Carnegie Scotland have also stressed, there was a point raised in extensive evidence to the Finance and Public Administration Committee in relation to the need to reform the National Performance Framework so that it works. So will the Scottish Government commit to this, as well as the recommendation from the committee that the Scottish Government set a time period to evaluate the impact of a revised National Performance Framework on the delivery of wellbeing and sustainable development outcomes? Because that whole National Performance Framework is being reviewed, so we don't have answers in front of us. I hope that the issues raised in the committee report, which the Scottish Government has not yet given clear commitments to act upon, will be reflected in the legacy papers that committees prepare in the last few weeks of this Parliament. What can be done now without waiting for future legislation? Which committee in the next Parliament will be responsible for delivering the wellbeing and sustainable development goals? And how will the SPCB deliver the accountability and oversight that those consulted, supported and campaigned for years? We urgently need answers to these questions because we cannot let Scotland fall behind. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
I need you to move the motion. I need you to move the motion, Ms. Wyatt.
I move the motion in my name. Thank you for that prompt.
Thank you. I now call on Colette Stevenson on behalf of the Social Justice and Social Security. Around 5 minutes, Ms Stevenson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And it's my pleasure to open this debate on behalf of the Social Justice and Social Security Committee. I wish to begin by thanking Sarah Boyack for introducing the bill. I would also like to thank all those who provided evidence, as well as my fellow committee members for their thoughtful consideration of the provisions in the bill. I would also like to thank the Minister for providing a response to our report ahead of today's debate. A majority of the committee concluded that the bill should not proceed to stage 2. And whilst a minority felt there is a strong argument for the bill to proceed, in terms of the policy objectives for the bill, there were 3 key components there: establishing statutory definitions of the terms sustainable development and wellbeing, imposing a statutory duty on public bodies to consider wellbeing and sustainable development in the exercise of their functions, and creating the Office of the Future Generations Commissioner for Scotland. Sarah Boyack told us that all 3 are necessary to achieve the bill's policy objectives. And we heard convincing arguments about the positive role that statutory duties could play in assisting public bodies to meet sustainable development and wellbeing objectives. However, a key concern raised is the potential for the new duty to duplicate rather than complement existing public sector duties. In particular, the duty to have regard to the national outcomes in the Community Empowerment Scotland Act 2015. And we asked the Scottish Government to be open to amending legislation by exploring what could be achieved by strengthening the duties in the Community Empowerment Scotland Act 2015. The Minister indicated in his response that the focus at this time is on improving implementation of this duty. However, the Scottish Government is open to considering legislative improvements or changes in the future, and that is very much welcome. The bill establishes a Future Generations Commissioner for Scotland. The intention is for the Commissioner to champion the issues underpinning the bill, ensure its successful implementation and build policy coherence for sustainable development throughout Scotland's public sector. The committee does not disagree with the need for effective oversight to ensure implementation of the bill's provisions. However, issues were raised in evidence about the Commissioner's overlap with existing remits of the Commissioners and oversight bodies, the cost of this approach compared to other options, and that establishing a Commissioner does not meet the criteria agreed by Parliament. Yes, sorry.
Sarah Boyack.
The member for taking my intervention. Would the member accept that it would be possible to establish memorandum of understandings with existing commissioners so there was no overlap? A discussion I had, for example, with the Auditor General, that you avoid overlap and you don't waste public money because you have that constructive conversation at the start, just as they have had with the Welsh Commissioner.
Colette Stevenson, I can give you the time back.
Yeah, thank you for that intervention. And in terms of the overlap and the evidence that were provided by SPCB as well, I take on board that, and I hope that that feedback feeds into the Scottish Government when they're reviewing the national framework in terms of development and future development and sustainability as part of your proposed bill as well. So thank you for that. So, in terms of the National Performance Framework, the Scottish Government told the committee that its current review of the National Performance Framework and the national outcomes provides an opportunity to achieve the policy objectives of the bill. And given the timing of the review coinciding with the introduction of the bill, it was not possible for the committee to come to a view on that. And during our scrutiny of the bill, we received suggestions for improving the MPF and the national outcomes, and witnesses told us that there needs to be a more effective way for public bodies to demonstrate compliance so that it is not a tick box exercise. So we asked the Scottish Government to take into consideration, as part of its review, the evidence we received. I welcome the Minister's confirmation that the review will focus on areas identified in our report, such as strengthening accountability and oversight mechanisms, alignment with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and consideration of the investment required to improve the embedding of wellbeing and sustainable development to achieve policy coherence across public bodies. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, while the committee supports the policy objectives of the bill, we also recognise the significant doubts raised about its likely impact, cost and effectiveness. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Stevenson. And I call on Richard Lochhead. Around 5 minutes, Minister.
Okay, thank you. I welcome the opportunity to speak in today's debate on the Wellbeing and Sustainable Development Bill brought before the Parliament by Sarah Boyack. And firstly, I want to thank Sarah Boyack for bringing this forward and her constructive contribution to what's a very important debate in relation to Scotland's future. I also want to extend my thanks to Colette Stevenson and her committee, the Social Justice and Social Security Committee, for their detailed scrutiny and all the engagement they've carried out as well. Their work has certainly helped to shine a light on many of the important issues. So I just want to recognise the positive intentions behind the bill. The Scottish Government shares its core objectives, embedding wellbeing and sustainable development across public sector decision-making, strengthening accountability and planning for the longer term. These aims certainly reflect the values of fairness, sustainability and collective wellbeing that do underpin our national performance framework, which in turn aligns with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and sets out the kind of Scotland that we want to build. And of course, this debate comes at a key moment. The Government's committed to reform the national performance framework and we did that back in January 2025. And since then, officials have undertaken substantial work to strengthen the framework as a long-term strategic goal. So we welcome the Committee Stage 1 report that recognises the importance of embedding wellbeing and sustainable development in public policy and welcomes our commitment to reform the National Performance Framework. We also acknowledge the constructive conclusions and recommendations within the report, and we responded to that in advance of this debate, as Colette Stevenson referred to. So we share the committee's view on the importance of enhancing policy coherence across the public sector and ensuring that the National Performance Framework is implemented consistently. And we are committed to doing this through a reformed framework. The committee concluded that, on balance, the bill should not proceed to Stage 2, citing, amongst other things, duplication, cost and complexity. So, clearly, the government shares that view. We can achieve the bill's aims more effectively and efficiently through a strengthened national performance framework. So we believe that legislation is not required at this time.
Sarah Boyack.
For taking intervention. Will the reformed National Performance Framework enable measurement against national outcomes, wellbeing principles and sustainable development goals? And will it include best value audits so that there are actual ways to monitor implementation and make sure it doesn't fail like the last one has?
Minister, and give you the time back.
Well, the new model for the National Performance Framework will be concluded shortly, and it will come forward for consultation in this session. So the member will have an opportunity to give a view on that, and we'll take it seriously, and indeed the views of other members seriously as well. And there will be an opportunity, of course, to reflect on the consultation at that point. But there's three main reasons for our position. Firstly, duplication. We already have a statutory basis for the National Performance Framework through the Community Empowerment Bill of 2015, which requires public bodies to have regard to the national outcomes. Introducing parallel duties risks creating confusion rather than more clarity. Second, there's costs and duties. The bill proposes establishing a Future Generations Commission, as we've heard, with a broad remit and requiring significant resources at a time of real fiscal pressures. So we have to consider whether this is proportionate and whether alternative approaches have been fully explored, in line, of course, with the SPCB's supported bodies landscape review, again as referred to in previous speeches. Third, there's issues around timing and priorities. The committee noted that the National Performance Framework is the right route to achieve these aims and recommended setting a time frame to evaluate its impact. And again, we agree with that. Strengthening accountability through the framework is the most coherent and cost-effective way forward, we believe. So legislation is not the only route to cultural change. Many countries with strong wellbeing frameworks, such as Canada, Finland and the Netherlands, don't legislate definitions or create commissioners. They achieve impact through clear vision, shared purpose and effective implementation. Scotland, we believe, can do the same. So, building on the proposals developed in the reform programme, we will soon invite a wider conversation that I referred to help shape a stronger proposition for consideration by the next government and the next parliament. Our aim is to embed wellbeing and sustainable development in a way that drives real change and not additional bureaucracy. So, reforming the National Performance Framework is a core objective in the public reforms strategy, to ensure a clear connection between the national outcomes and ways of working and accountability across Scotland. Our ambition is for that refreshed National Performance Framework to sit at the apex of decision-making, ensuring a clear and visible link between strategy, delivery and national outcomes, regardless of the government of the day. So in closing, I just say that I believe our shared goal is a Scotland that is prosperous and fair, and a Scotland that plans for the longer term and delivers for future generations, and that's what we're intending in achieving, but we don't believe that the bill is the best way forward at this point in time.
Thank you, Minister. And I call Ros McCall, around 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I begin by recognising the long-standing commitment of Sarah Boyack to the issues that sit behind this bill. She's campaigned on questions of sustainable development and long-term thinking for many years. And that dedication is acknowledged, I think, across this chamber. And on a personal level, I have a lot of respect for Ms Boyack, and I greatly admire her passion and determination. And I also agree with much of the content that she's set out. There's a widespread concern that policy making can be too short-term. There's a frustration that public bodies are often constrained by annual budgets. There's a shared understanding that scarce public resources must be used more efficiently and effectively. And there is legitimate questions on how well the National Performance Framework is working in practice. And these points came through clearly in the evidence on the bill. However, agreeing on the problem doesn't automatically mean that this bill is the right solution. At stage one, the Scottish Conservatives remain unconvinced that new primary legislation is either necessary or proportionate, and we do not believe that this bill will deliver the system-wide change that's being promised. The bill places a new statutory duty on public bodies to have due regard to promoting wellbeing and sustainable development, while also introducing statutory definitions to both concepts. And credit is due to the member for attempting to grapple with what is undeniably complex ideas. But the complexity is precisely the challenge here. Wellbeing is a highly subjective and multifaceted concept. It means different things to different people, at different stages of life and in different circumstances. It encompasses physical and mental health, economic security, social connection, environmental quality and personal autonomy. And I question whether it's realistic or even wise to attempt to fix such a concept in statute in a way that will stand the test of time. The committee heard clear evidence that these definitions could add confusion rather than clarity. Public bodies already operate within a dense landscape of strategies, frameworks, impact assessments and reporting requirements. And the committee was not persuaded that this bill would simplify that landscape, and nor am I. There's a real risk that it would instead add another layer of process without improving outcomes. And that brings me to the proposal to create a Future Generations Commissioner. Now, I understand the intention behind this, and I do not doubt the sincerity of those who support it. However, the Parliament has already agreed clear criteria for the creation of new commissioners, following the supported body's landscape review. These criteria include clarity of remit, complementary, simplicity and accountability. Excuse me, put teeth in. And Stage 1 Committee was not convinced that those criteria had been met, and I share that view. We have seen a steady expansion on the number and cost of commissioners over the years, and I'm yet to be convinced that an increase in commissioners creates an exponential change in the outcomes. There's also a constitutional point here. Commissioners can unintentionally dilute ministerial responsibility and blur lines of accountability. Ministers should be accountable to Parliament for delivering outcomes, and Parliament scrutiny should not be outsourced. So, Presiding Officer, the committee recognised that there's support for the bill's broad ambition, but the majority concluded that it should not proceed to stage 2. They cited doubts about effectiveness, cost, overlap and delivery. That's already been mentioned, and I believe that conclusion was well-founded. This bill has undoubtedly promoted valuable discussion about how we think long-term and how we improve policy coherence. But discussion alone is not sufficient justification for legislation. And for those reasons, while we respect the intentions behind the bill and the work that has gone into it, the Scottish Conservatives will not support it at stage 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms McCall. I now call Carol Mochan again, around 4 minutes. Ms Mochan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I would like to begin, as others have, by thanking my colleague Sarah Boyack for her ambition and commitment to introducing this bill. A great deal of work has gone into this, and I commend her for her ongoing dedication to protecting the environment, tackling poverty and promoting collective wellbeing. Scottish Labour agrees with the general principles of the bill and will be supporting it at stage 1. The integration of wellbeing and sustainable development definitions into legislation will not only improve policy coherence and public body guidance, but also provide the structure and accountability that will help contribute to Scotland's progress towards achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goal. More must be done to further embed wellbeing and sustainable development principles into public body decision-making, and it's clear that too often short-term priorities drive decision-making over long-term sustainability. The committee's evidence sessions supported the value of creating statutory definitions and assisting public bodies to meet their wellbeing and sustainable development obligations. Evidence also overwhelmingly supported the aims and ambitions of the bill, and organisations such as Oxfam have long backed calls for the bill and see it as a way of enhancing the national outcomes with decision-making and delivery. Without this, they remain sceptical over whether non-legislative approaches will be sufficient in achieving sustainable development and wellbeing goals. The Scottish Government has dismissed the bill as they believe that its aims can already be achieved within the current policy landscape, and the additional legislation that additional legislation would be unnecessary. However, despite what the Minister mentioned in his speech today, for years the Scottish Government have promised a reformed, strengthened national performance framework. And in fact, I believe these promises were made back in 2021, but we've yet to see these promises really come to fruition. Instead, we are left with an outdated structure and legislation which is not delivering. Clearly, the current approach is not working, would be our position. The committee's report also found that the proposed legislation was not incompatible with any of the planned reform to the National Performance Framework, yet the Government still will not support the bill. Scottish Labour welcomes the ambition of the bill and the clear structure, guidance and accountability mechanisms it would give to public bodies and other organisations. The fact that it complements the National Performance Framework should be welcomed, and the Government should view the bill as something that strengthens existing ambitions rather than being an unnecessary fact. The world has been entered into precarious times, with some world leaders denouncing the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. So setting out a clear framework which embeds the principles of sustainability and well-being into the heart of public body decision-making can only help to ensure that the climate, poverty and inequality and the well-being of future generations are consistently at the forefront of decision-making rather than an afterthought. This can only be a good thing, and that is why Scottish Labour are supporting the bill tonight at decision time. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Mochan. And I call Maggie Chapman. Again, around 4 minutes, Ms Chapman.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I'm very grateful to Sarah Boyack for all the work she has done on this important bill. Because the bill before us today makes me wonder where we would have been had we not waited until now to formally recognise in law the well-being of future generations. If we had not left it so very late to think about decarbonising, would we be experiencing the intensity and frequency of extreme weather events that we are seeing now? If planning law had been written with nature in mind, would we still be seeing as many as 1 in 9 of our native species under threat of extinction? So much of that destruction was and is done knowingly. As early as 1954, the fossil fuel and car industries had clear evidence that their activities would cause global warming in the future. Yet they drilled and burned like there was no tomorrow. And indeed, there may not be if we do not take radical climate action today. The wealthy few's greed for profit in the present was put ahead of the well-being of future generations and of the poorest. And for too long, politics has been trapped in the short term, the next headline, the next budget line, the next election cycle. Meanwhile, the planet burns, nature collapses, and inequality deepens by design, not by accident. No wonder we have young people going on climate strikes from school, protesting that their futures have been sacrificed, struggling daily with existential dread. So this bill is a start, but I believe we must go further. With climate scientists saying we'll likely breach 1.5 degrees warming in a few years, we cannot just have regard for sustainable development and well-being of future generations. The duty could be strengthened so that public bodies must, as Oxfam and Stop Climate Chaos have suggested, and I quote, promote and deliver sustainable development while protecting the well-being of current and future generations. This is closer to the definition in the Welsh Act, which is now approaching its 10th birthday. There, public bodies are under a duty to carry out sustainable development. We are starting 10 years behind other parts of the UK. We should be doing more, faster. I'd like to see the definitions of sustainable development and other terms we use broadened, as no less will do than radical climate action in everything, everywhere, by everyone. The definitions of well-being and sustainable development are entirely anthropocentric. This must change to reflect the nature emergency faced by the animal, plant and insect life we share our planet with, and with the habitats and ecosystems that sustain all life. And as witnessed by the thousands of tons of waste still being exported to low and middle-income countries, we must recognise that the actions we take here have impacts far beyond Scotland. And as we must all take climate action, the duty should be expanded to any public organisations and any other organisation or business carrying out public functions on their behalf. Yes.
Sarah Boyack.
There were some very helpful comments made by stakeholders about the whole issue of procurement, and I thought they were very well made, and that could have been proportionate, crafted, and there is a capacity to amend a bill when it goes from stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. So I was very keen to engage with stakeholders between stage 1 and 2, and I think we could resolve some of those issues. Would the member agree?
Maggie Chapp.
I thank Sarah Boyack for her intervention, and yes, absolutely. I think that there's ample opportunity, if this bill progresses, to look at exactly how we can use all the levers at our disposal to get ourselves into as strong a position as possible. Because I think we also need to make clear that this duty to act should be prioritised over all others, especially when there is a conflict. Scottish Enterprise, for example, is under a duty to promote industrial growth. But growth without any reference to sustainability and well-being is a recipe for climate breakdown and social injustice. Presiding Officer, the climate crisis we face means we must take radical climate action. Not here and there, not just a little bit, not by some with others left out. Nothing less than radical, some might say revolutionary, climate action. To do that, we need a system for ensuring everything we do makes our future more sustainable, more livable, and ensures climate and social justice is done now and in the future. This bill is a really good start, and it could be strengthened, as I've already outlined in conversation with Sarah Boyack. Those who do not support the bill today will have to answer to their younger constituents when they ask why, given time is so badly running out, they didn't take every opportunity to create a sustainable future for them and for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Chapman. We move to the open debate. I call first Marie McNair, to be followed by Claire Baker. Around 4 minutes. Ms McNair.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I speak in this debate today as a member of the Social Justice and Social Security Committee. My thanks to the clerks for their assistance with our report and to everyone who responded to our calls for views. This bill was set out would create a new public body which requires all public bodies to have due regard for the need to promote wellbeing and sustainable development in the exercise of their functions. The committee received a substantial amount of evidence in our call for views, and those who were supportive highlighted a number of reasons for strengthening the integration of sustainable development and wellbeing into public policy making. These included the climate and biodiversity crises, rapid societal and industrial change, including increased use of artificial intelligence. On the other hand, those who were not supportive indicated that these objectives could be delivered through existing policy and legislation. And it's my view that the majority of the committee that the latter is correct. Whilst the committee supports the policy intention of the bill, the majority concluded that it should not proceed to stage 2 for reasons which I will now set out. The central concern raised throughout was the potential for this to duplicate existing public sector duties, such as the Community Empowerment Scotland Act 2015, the Climate Change Scotland Act 2009, the Procurement Reform Scotland Act 2014 and the Child Poverty Scotland Act 2017. This was highlighted by many, including Aberdeenshire Council, who described much of what is outlined in the bill to be a potential duplication of work. Historic Environmental Scotland raised a similar concern about overlaps and similarities between this and other legislation and policy initiatives. This was pointed out by the Minister, who confirmed that public bodies already have wellbeing and sustainable development reporting duties through the National Performance Framework and their accountable officers. On Part 2 of the bill regarding the Future Generation Commissioner for Scotland, whilst the majority of the respondents to the committee's calls for views indicated support for the establishment of a commissioner, concerns were raised that this could result in an overlap with the duties and responsibilities of other commissioners and oversight bodies. This point was highlighted by Scottish Environmental Link, who stated that this could be a key challenge, and also by the Children and Young People's Commissioner Scotland, who did not support the establishment of a Commissioner due to the risk of overlap with their office and that of the Scottish Human Rights Commission. Presiding Officer, whilst I agree that improving public policy coherence and embedding long-term policy making across the public sector is essential, it is vital that this is done in such a way that it does not burden public bodies with overlapping duties. Indeed, it does not seem appropriate given the Scottish Government's ongoing review of the National Performance Framework, and this will play a significant role in strengthening accountability and embedding wellbeing and sustainable development in all that we do. It would therefore seem more sensible to focus on and complete the NPF reform process rather than create new legislation at this time. Therefore, to conclude, Presiding Officer, whilst the Committee supports the policy objectives of the Bill to embed sustainable development and wellbeing as primary considerations in public policy making, the majority of the Committee have concluded that the Bill should not proceed at this time to Stage 2 due to the potential for overlap, duplication and confusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms McNair. I now call Claire Baker to be followed by Bob Doris. Ms Baker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. So I became a member of the Social Justice and Social Security Committee just before Christmas. So while I was a member when the report was agreed, I wasn't involved in the committee evidence sessions. But thankfully, the Stage 1 report does provide an explanation of the arguments and the views expressed, and so I feel I can provide comments on the Members' Bill and the committee's work. Sarah Boyack has outlined the twisted tale that has brought us to this point. Her description of false starts, assurances given but not delivered, and the Government's rollback on legislation in this area encapsulates her frustration at the likely outcome today. Sarah Boyack has shown commitment to the proposal in the bill, forcefully outlining why it is the right course of action, and she's been tenacious in her pursuit of this bill. The summary of consultation responses showed that 92% supported the proposals, with 78% of those expressing full support. Many respondents stated the key reason for support was the establishment of a Commissioner post, and Wales is often given as the positive example of what can be achieved in the creation of this post. The bill has an ambitious aim. It recognises that while progress has been made towards Scotland meeting its climate change targets, much more needs to be done in embedding sustainable development and wellbeing at its heart. This is for the benefit of all communities who will be impacted by the journey to net zero, to increase the impact of that change being positive, and to shift the focus away from short-termism to embedding a direction and policies that go beyond the electoral cycle and focus on future generations. Public Health Scotland described this as a golden opportunity to place wellbeing and sustainable development at the centre of everything the public sector does, saying that it would assist the need to move away from short-termism to long-term thinking. Once the committee got into the detail, several issues were raised and explored. Definitions became a thorny issue. There was a discussion around the definition of a public body, the definition of due regard and whether this was strong enough, and how the outcomes would be measured, and how the statutory definition of wellbeing and sustainable development could be agreed and understood. Sarah Boyack argued that some of these definitions were already in use and understood, and that the role of the Commissioner would support these definitions, and they would have investigative powers which could be used to improve accountability and compliance. There was a lot of discussion over how the bill would relate to a host of existing public sector duties and whether it would complement or duplicate. The Scottish Government argued that the National Performance Framework, which is currently under review, will deliver similar aims to the bill, and shared the view of other witnesses that the bill didn't add value to existing plans. However, alternative reviews returned to the frustration at the lack of clear statutory duties linked to a shared long-term vision, as described by Dr Max French, co-author of the Carnegie UK Options Paper for Scotland, which was co-commissioned by Oxfam Scotland, ISDA Scotland and Wheel All Scotland. While the majority of the committee didn't support the bill, they do, throughout the report, recognise the weaknesses in the current policy framework, and in this case call for the duty in the Community Empowerment Scotland Act 2015 to be strengthened. The committee also recognises the lack of policy coherence across public bodies, and while the majority of the committee weren't convinced that this bill is the answer, they do say they are unclear how the Scottish Government intends to address this. There was a general lack of confidence in the national policy framework and a need for the review of the framework to provide clarity and drive forward this agenda. In regard to the creation of the role of a Commissioner, Sarah Boyack could hardly have chosen a worse time to reach Stage 1 with this bill. There was widespread support from witnesses that a Commissioner would be a positive addition, describing the role as an opportunity to drive forward the aims of the bill, shift institutional behaviours and foster joined-up thinking. However, following the SPCB-supported body's Landscape Review Committee's report, the majority of the committee were not convinced that the criteria had been met. In conclusion, I do support the progress of this bill to stage 2 and believe that the issues raised can be addressed through amendments and through further discussion. However, if that is not to happen, the question is, what is the alternative? Weaknesses have been identified, and as a whole, I am not confident the committee is convinced that any alternatives on offer at the moment will meet the bill's admirable aims. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Baker. I now call Bob Doris to be followed by Claire Adamson. Mr Doris.
Presiding Officer, as others have done, can I commend Sarah Boyack for her diligence and dedication to this legislation, her commitment to the general policy area over many years in this Parliament, to all those who gave evidence for our committee scrutiny of this legislation. At the heart of this Members' Bill is a hugely ambitious and important policy aim. That is to further embed wellbeing and sustainable development into the work of Scotland's public sector. Indeed, the Scottish Government has been considering its own legislation in the matters we've heard, but has ultimately decided that a refreshed national performance framework was a better way of successfully pursuing the policy aim. Can I say, Presiding Officer, on balance, and it is on balance, I agree with the Government on this matter. The bill gives a statutory definition of wellbeing, whereas the national performance framework is, by definition, a far broader wellbeing framework and sets the vision for the kind of Scotland that we all want to live in, with 11 national outcomes and 81 associated indicators, a broader suite of indicators for achieving wellbeing and sustainable development. Public bodies, as set out in the Community Empowerment Act, have a duty to have regard for those outcomes and indicators. There is a statutory obligation currently. The bill's statutory definition of sustainable development is intended to align with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. So are the indicators and outcomes within the National Performance Framework. So we've got a match up there with legislation that already exists. The policy memorandum of the bill states that the policy and objectives include that it will foster a joined-up approach of sustainable development across the public sector, which will complement and enhance existing national framework for tackling the challenges faced by society, including climate change. Very important and very commendable. However, I believe that if existing frameworks need to be enhanced, that's just what we should do, rather than add another layer of statutory duties onto public bodies. Our committee heard concerns over such an overlap. Sarah Boyack wishes to achieve policy coherence, and again, that's absolutely right, but I think there could actually be a risk of the opposite being the case. Our committee did not think evidence was sufficiently clear that the bill would deliver policy coherence. The issue that needs to be addressed is how we ensure public bodies are meeting existing duties regarding sustainable development and wellbeing. And for me, a key recommendation in the report is that public bodies must have the tools, guidance, support and accountability mechanisms to ensure a consistent approach to delivery of the wellbeing sustainable development goals. That is a truism, with or without this bill. The Scottish Government must be clear how its review of the National Performance Framework will deliver this. There is still work to be done on that. Our committee suggested that any review of the NPF could also include how public bodies use impact assessments and whether the requirement to have a due regard is strong enough. The bill sought to deliver such aspirations through the creation of a Future Generations Commissioner for Scotland. There are absolute benefits of establishing such a Commissioner. However, given the potential costs involved and the overlap with other commissioners and public bodies, and indeed other potential options for accountability mechanisms, I agree there should not be a new Commissioner. Our committee is clear that accountability, monitoring and transparency absolutely has to be secured with any refreshed national performance framework. Carnegie UK set out other models for doing that. One of our recommendations from our committee is that a new committee of this Parliament or a cross-committee approach must be created in the next Parliament to ensuring there is absolute parliamentary focus in relation to that. But we also have existing public bodies, be that commissioners such as the Children's Commissioner or the Human Rights Commissioner, and public bodies such as Environmental Standards Scotland, who could all play a role in relation to this, rather than creating a new commissioner. So I have to say I agree with the policy intent, but
the time in hand of Sarah Boyack.
I thank the member for taking his intervention. Would he therefore agree that additional resources would be required? Because, as the member will remember, if he read his evidence from Audit Scotland, they said that potentially having extra duties to implement some of the issues in my bill would both actually require more resources, but also could divert them from their existing work.
Bob Doris.
I think that's a very helpful intervention, Sarah Boyack, because what I'd put on the record and say is that when the refreshed National Performance Framework is ready for delivery, the Scottish Government should be clear the resources required to make sure that that is monitored and implemented appropriately, be it Audit Scotland or any other body that may have a role in relation to that. I was just finishing off, Presiding Officer, to say that I agree with the policy intent. This bill, I think, unfortunately, through no fault of Sarah Boyack, came at the wrong time, and I think we should await the outcome of the National Performance Framework review, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Doris. And I now call Claire Adamson, who is joining us remotely, and I would want to ensure that Ms Adamson has put her... She has. Ms Adamson.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Can I commend Sarah Boyack for her work and her commitment to this area, and the proposals of sustainable development and wellbeing in law and an oversight of that proposed as a commissioner are absolutely reasonable asks in this area. However, I note the work that the committee has done and has rejected this for a number of reasons. I worked with Sarah Boyack in the SEAC committee, which I convene, and we looked at culture as being a key part of wellbeing in our society. Only last week, I hosted an event here in the Parliament with Art 27 Scotland, brought together artists, practitioners, communities to discuss cultural rights and how central access to culture embeds wellbeing, equality and participation in our communities. Participation in the arts, heritage, language, community life improves mental health, reduces isolation, strengthens social coherence and supports lifelong learning. It also, in doing so, is a preventative measure, and we have been talking about preventative measures to ensure that people are helped and interventions happen well before they become a crisis point. So in doing this, we are actually supporting our health service and other services in our area. And it's important that we do now, given the work that's been done and the government's response to this, that we act in this area. It's 10 years since the UN Sustainability Goals were first established. It's 15 years since the Christie Commission. And yet I think we would all agree that the implementation of those proposals that would have led to the embedding of wellbeing and sustainability into our decision-making have not been met to the extent which we would have expected, or indeed how we can do going forward. So I welcome the work that the committee did on this proposal. I welcome the fact that wellbeing is being regarded as important, but I would also say that even in this budget report that our SEAC committee has done, we are looking to see how that wellbeing is being embedded cross-portfolio across government. So I think this is a pivotal time, a really important time. We're at the end of a parliamentary session, moving to new objectives. The government is reviewing its own sustainability goals in light of developments. And I think this is the opportunity when we start to act in this area. We embed wellbeing, we embed sustainability into our policy making, into our decision making, and that will take a cultural change across Scotland. But we need to stop talking about this and get on and do it. And I think that's the opportunity that presents itself to all of us going forward now and in the future. And this will take cooperation. It will take every single local authority getting on board with the ambition that Sarah Boyack has given in her proposals and with the work that the government is doing to implement those proposals. And we need to get that cohesion going forward to fully engage and achieve the ambitions of these proposals. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Adamson. We now move to closing speeches. I call on Patrick Harvey to close on behalf of the Scottish Greens. Mr Harvey.
Can I congratulate and thank Sarah Boyack for her work on this bill, and I regret that today looks like being a missed opportunity. We do need to begin with a recognition that long-term thinking isn't, in fact, happening. We are not collectively taking the interests of future generations into account in decision-making in the way that we should. Now, right-wing opposition to sustainable development and well-being economics isn't anything new, and I have to say it's sad that the Minister is relying on support from that side of the chamber to find a majority to block this bill. Differences between the Green and SNP positions are not news either. The Green manifesto supported the creation of a Future Generations Commissioner. The SNP one didn't. When we sat down to negotiate the Butte House Agreement, we said we'd keep the issue open in the hope that we might reach agreement as the issue developed. Now, I regret that that opportunity was ended when the SNP broke that agreement, but they did still have an opportunity for the government to find a way to make progress, even if it meant reaching a compromise with the member behind the bill instead of acting as a bloc. And they've chosen not to do that. In contrast, the SNP have never been reluctant to impose new statutory duties on public bodies to prioritise economic growth. So I can see no principled reason not to support duties on sustainable development. As for the Commissioner proposal, I'm afraid I don't have time. As for the Commissioner proposal, Sarah Boyack has recognised that there is a new context of the Parliament's change of approach to the general issue of the landscape of Commissioners and SPCB-supported bodies. This is a serious issue, and I agree that the principles that we've all agreed ought to be applied. Has the last resort test been met in this occasion? Well, maybe not. There are alternative ways in which the policy objectives might be met, although I have to say that in evidence to the committee, a very strong case was made that the Commissioner would be the most effective way of meeting those policy objectives. But the thing is, for Parliament to be able to reach a genuine, fully informed judgment on that question, we should be able to consider the option of a Commissioner alongside the government's preferred alternative of the NPF review, with both of them fully formed. Now, if this bill was to pass at stage 1, and we simply amended the commencement date for the Commissioner provisions until the NPF review has been progressed and we can see the detail, then Parliament would be in a stronger position to make that judgment properly. And that approach would be consistent with the agreed principles on the creation of new bodies. Now, personally, I still take the view that the option of a Commissioner would be the most effective approach. It would lock in that long-term vision, sustainability and the interests of future generations, because even if the Scottish Government is right that the NPF can include these principles, it is a statement of government policy, current government policy, and it lacks key features. It doesn't bind any future government in the way that legislation can. It doesn't bring in impartial, independent challenge in a way that the Commissioner can. But even if Parliament decided, in the fullness of time, that the NPF review was the better approach, and that I'm wrong on this, it would at least be making that decision in a fully informed way, with both options fully fleshed out in front of it. It would be far better to do that than to kill off this bill today. The proposal Sarah Boyack has brought should proceed, even if amendments at stage 2 might make the changes that I've suggested there. I find the government's reasons for blocking it unconvincing at best, and its choice not to even seek a compromise which could go forward stands in stark contrast to its willingness repeatedly over the years to put other duties on public bodies which directly conflict with sustainability and well-being. So, in closing, Presiding Officer, can I once again recognise the work Sarah Boyack has done? I commend the bill, and the Greens will be voting for it this evening.
Thank you, Mr Harvey. I now call on Cara Mockin to close on behalf of Scottish Labour. Ms Mockin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In closing for Labour, can I thank everyone across the chamber for, I think, a really important and interesting debate. I think there is actually real enthusiasm in the chamber for the work that Sarah Boyack has undertaken, and I really thank her for it. But it leads me to be confused as to why we can't, as Patrick Harvey has mentioned, get something over the line on this at stage 1. Every member agrees Sarah Boyack has been consistent in her approach to this from the very early days, actually, of our election to the Parliament. Like others, I want to thank my colleagues on the committee, whom I'm sure will allow me to say that we really did appreciate the work and the passion the member brought on this bill. And can I thank the clerks and the witnesses who have really put the hours in on this and allowed us to understand and scrutinise the bill as it was presented to us in committee. As I laid out in my opening remarks, Scottish Labour agrees with the general principles of the bill and will be supporting it at stage 1 tonight, and really wanted within the debate to hear if we could get some agreement to get this over at stage 1. So important, and I think everyone agrees, is that the integration of wellbeing and sustainable development definitions into legislation would not only improve policy coherence and public body guidance, but also provide the structure and accountability that would really help Scotland contribute progress towards achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals, of course.
Bob Doris.
Thank the member for giving me. I wonder if the member would recognise that the power of the National Performance Framework is set out in statute under the Community Empowerment Act, and by creating a new piece of legislation and statute, given a different set of powers with a different definition for sustainability and well-being, there could be a lack of policy coherence, and therefore if there was to be a further definition, setting it within a revised Community Empowerment Act may actually be the way to go about it in the future after NPF is revised.
Cara Mockin.
Thank you. I thank the member for the intervention. I think the critical point is that this bill could give us an opportunity to actually action something. Today there has been very little action, and actually what we're talking about is the fact that it is so incoherent and that this focused us, and it focused us in committee, and so therefore it could help to, if Sarah Boyack worked with the government, we could get a focused outcome on this. And added to this point, I think I was going to mention just how the willingness of the member to work with the government. So even when they brought their own bill, which Sarah Boyack was obviously disappointed in terms of her own bill, but she could see that there could be some work together. So I think we can understand why Sarah Boyack is so disappointed in the committee not agreeing it at stage 1, but absolutely of the government not supporting the bill or even trying to work together to support the bill at decision times. I'm just aware of time, so I want to just, in my last few remaining minutes, turn to the member in charge of the bill and really say thank you from Scottish Labour. I'm sure that people across the chamber know that Sarah Boyack will be standing down at the next election. So I want to thank her not just for the work on this bill, but the contribution to Parliament over the many years that she's been here. And I think we've heard today that colleagues also agree with that. And there's been many kind words for Sarah Boyack in the contributions. Sarah was elected to the new Scottish Parliament in 1999. She was Minister for Transport and the Environment in the Scottish Executive, went on to be Minister for Transport and Planning. And I think she's quite rightly should be very proud that during that time she introduced one of Scottish Labour's flagship policies of the free bus pass to people over 60 and disabled people. And I think it's safe to say that Scottish Labour have been proud to have Sarah Boyack on our benches, whether it has been in government or on these benches in opposition. And I think and I hope across the chamber we can agree that the Parliament have benefited greatly from her ability to work cross-party with determination and with a can-do attitude. Presiding Officer, this is an important bill. Sarah Boyack has given important contributions to the Chamber, and it is unfortunate if it falls tonight. But I think the important message is that this work must go on, and I will close on those remarks.
Thank you, Ms Mochan. I now call on Liz Smith to close on behalf of the Scottish Conservatives. Ms Smith.
Thank you, and can I absolutely concur with everything that Carol Mochan has just said. Sarah Boyack is not only a long-standing member of this Parliament, but somebody who I think has served her constituents extremely well and the stakeholders on whom she has represented, and particularly about the issues that are before us today. But I also want to say, from a personal basis, I understand exactly what it is like taking a member's bill through this Parliament, especially one that runs for a very long time. You get knocked back, you try something else, you get knocked back again. So I have a great deal of sympathy for some of the difficulties that you have encountered. And can I also just put on record again, I think the non-government bill unit, I said this in my own bill, is outstanding. And I'm sure that Sarah Boyack has gained a great deal from your expertise. Now, can I agree with Sarah Boyack on the background context of her bill? Because there has been a long-standing need for a much more holistic approach to policy making. She's absolutely right on that. Also, that public bodies have often operated under a short-termism. I think Mr Harvey referred to that because of the constraints of one-year budgets. That's correct too. And it is essential that we make much better use of scarce resources, and there are concerns definitely about the National Performance Framework. Now, I took trouble to read some of the submissions to the bill, and I think most people agree with that background context. So I very much understand where Sarah Boyack is coming from with regard to her bill, but I am sceptical about various aspects of it. And I want to just sound these out. I think when it comes to Section 3, I think the member made a very valiant attempt to define the terms wellbeing and sustainable development, and credit to the member, because I think that has made us think. But as my colleague Rose McCall said, it is extremely difficult to put that into legislation with definitive and comprehensive meanings for these terms, because they are multifaceted concepts, and I think they take on board emotional and cultural, mental, physical health, as well as sort of all the social and environmental safeguards. And so I think it's very difficult to get these complexities into a balance that would suit all individuals, whether that's now or whether it's in the future. Now, there's been much discussion, obviously, about this Commissioner recommendation. And I'm obviously a member of the Finance Committee. We went into this in very considerable detail. It was one of the most interesting aspects of parliamentary business that I've participated in. And I think we were very conscious not just of the increasing number of commissioners, but also about the costs. Now, you would expect the Finance Committee to do that. What interested me, as somebody who's been representing patients and, on the El Jamel inquiry, and therefore there's been a lot of discussion about the absence of commissioners when public bodies fail. I understand where Sarah Boyack is coming from, because there has been failure, but I don't think that is a need for new legislation. What it is a need for is that government and the public bodies take responsibility for decision-making, and if they get things wrong, it's them that should be held accountable. And I don't think we are seeing enough of that. So that's why I'm very sceptical about the need for another commissioner. Now, I just want to finish on the basis that it's always difficult when we're contemplating new legislations, because it takes not only a great deal of effort and time to go through all the relevant evidence, but when there are differences of opinion, it's not always about the different parts of that evidence, it's actually about the process. And I think perhaps Sarah Boyack has maybe run into a bit of difficulty on that basis, that there should be processes that are workable. The fact that they're not workable and haven't been doing their job is not a fault of the legislation, it's a fault of those people who are in charge of that. So on that basis, I will finish my remarks.
Thank you, Ms Smith. I now call on the Minister, Richard Lockhead. Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Well, I'd like to begin by paying tribute to Sarah Boyack, as others have done as well. And of course, back in 1999, both Sarah Boyack and myself were elected to Parliament. And at that time, I was probably a young whippersnapper on the backbenches, giving the Minister at that time a hard time. And of course, things have changed over the years. But one thing that has been consistent to Sarah Boyack's contribution to Parliament, and I can testify personally to the fact that she's promoted the sustainability and wider environmental agenda in Parliament over many, many years and has made a real difference and will leave a legacy, a strong legacy behind in that regard, despite the fact that we're not on the same side exactly of this particular issue today. And I want to assure Sarah Boyack and others that as we reform the National Planning Framework, we will continue to listen to Sarah Boyack and others and reflect on their input and value it in the coming couple of months. And also I want to refer to the fact that when we came to government in 2007, I recall when we adopted the National Planning Framework and all the national outcomes and indicators that go alongside that, at the time it was seen as trailblazing. And here we are, of course, a number of years later, and the government accepts that the last few years have shown that it's not perfect and there's room for quite considerable improvement, and that's why we are undertaking the reform of the National Planning Framework. So let's just finish on the principles where we can agree. And firstly, we all agree that Scotland should embed wellbeing and sustainable development in our decision-making. We all agree that accountability has to be strengthened, and we all agree that planning for future generations is absolutely essential. Of course, where we differ today, some of us, is on whether this bill is the right way to achieve those aims. And again, the committee's own report concluded that reforming the National Performance Framework is the right route to achieve this. That work is well underway, as I said, and we hope to deliver improvements that Parliament has called for. And again, our position is clear. We do not believe that legislation is necessary at this time. The future may be different, but at this time, with the ongoing review, which is well underway, of the National Performance Framework, and in light of all the issues the committee has highlighted and others, this is not the right time for legislation, but we're not ruling out for the future if things change. So we believe that the objectives of the bill we're discussing today can and should be delivered through the reform of the National Performance Framework. And that will close the implementation gap that many people have identified, and here in Parliament as well, and it will embed wellbeing and sustainable development principles across the public sector without creating new statutory duties. The committee's report makes clear that while the policy aims are supported, legislation is not that route to change. It highlighted the risk of duplication, as we've heard from members of the committee, duplication with existing duties, and again we've heard that from some of the submission from stakeholders to the committee as well. And also recommended strengthening accountability through the National Performance Framework reform. A recommendation, of course, we're already acting on as part of the overall public service reform strategy. And in terms of accountability, which again has been a key theme throughout the concerns expressed about the National Performance Framework in past years, the committee and stakeholders have rightly highlighted that there are weaknesses in the current system, and that's why, again, the reform proposals include stronger governance, clearer reporting, and there will be enhanced accountability as well. And in terms of international comparisons, again, mentioned by a number of members, the committee also noted lessons from Wales, where they passed legislation in 2015, creating a commissioner and statutory duties. Now, while the Act has raised awareness, Audit Wales reports that system-wide change remains incomplete and enforcement is costly. And other countries, as I said in my opening remarks, like Canada, Finland, Netherlands, have achieved strong wellbeing frameworks, again without legislation, and Scotland should learn from these examples as well. And finally, in terms of timing, we have been developing proposals for reform in collaboration with the experts, including our Reform Advisory Group. In early 2026, in the next few weeks, hopefully, we plan to invite a wider discussion on the proposed model, prioritising key stakeholders, including people here in Parliament, members in Parliament, and those who have a legislative duty to have regard to national outcomes, such as public bodies and local authorities. So they'll all be consulted and they'll all be invited as part of that wider discussion. So, Presiding Officer, or Deputy Presiding Officer, in closing, creating new statutory duties and a new Commissioner would only add cost and complexity without clear evidence of whether it would add value. And at a time of these financial pressures we all know about, we must avoid unnecessary burdens on public bodies. So we believe the Government's approach, in light of all that, is pragmatic, it's proportionate and it's focused on outcomes. And it's about delivering change through a reformed national performance framework. So again, I welcome today's discussion on very, very important issues for Scotland's future. I do believe Scotland's made progress in recent years in terms of sustainability and environmental outcomes, but we all know there's lots of challenges and there's a long way to go. Therefore, we have to get this reform right. And whilst the Government cannot support the bill today and go beyond stage 1, we do welcome many of the objectives that people have outlined and the aims they want to achieve, and we want to support that going forward.
Thank you, Minister. I now call on Sarah Boyack to wind up the debate. Around 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Well, I just want to say to colleagues that other countries are now implementing future generations legislation, and I do think there's a danger we'll fall behind. The School of International Futures has been sharing best practice globally, and I think it is time for us to act. As Claire Adamson correctly observed, the Christie Commission recommended action to prevent, not cure, to invest now to save, and to keep people well and healthy. But we're still not delivering the joined-up thinking and action needed. And it's not just climate change, it's broad intersectional issues like poverty and inequality and how they all interact. And 15 years on, we are not getting that joined-up thinking to address well-being and sustainable development goals. As I said in my opening speech, we should be delivering the SDGs by 2030. That's now less than 5 years away. And we need ongoing leadership and accountability that isn't happening. We cannot keep kicking the can down the road. During the period of consultation, both on my bill and the Government's proposed bill, I met with several ministers, but they've all moved on, either at different responsibilities in the Parliament or as ministers. And I can tell you, Professor Colin Reid noted in his briefing to the committee that before our Parliament was established, it was recommended that there should be action on sustainable development. So when I was appointed to Donald Dewar's cabinet, I set up a cross-ministerial working group on sustainable development. But I can't tell you how long it lasted, because I didn't last very long as a minister. And one of the things I want to reflect on is that when ministers change, when there's reshuffles, when people move around the committees, you don't get the ongoing scrutiny in that way. And I think that's one of the reasons I felt a full-time commissioner would be important, to be accountable to the Parliament, to our committees, but also to have that headspace and ongoing responsibility. We need to make sure that future parliaments continue to prioritise this issue, and that needs strong leadership and accountability. And I would argue that we really need to think about how we hold the Scottish Government to account on this issue, because our public sector bodies need effective guidance and advice. They're under huge pressure, and they need clarity on how to translate wellbeing and sustainable development into culture change, new priorities and the investment we need now. Now, the National Performance Framework, as others have commented, was established in 2009, but actually it was also then refreshed in 2018. And in his follow-up evidence to the committee, Max French noted that in his research, he could not locate a single national policy in Scotland that the NPF has significantly impacted. And he noted that the evidence from Wales is that the Welsh Wellbeing Framework was far more systemically integrated in decision-making than the NPF in Scotland. So I do think there are lessons to learn. The need for action, which generated the support for my member's bill and the Scottish Government's initial bill proposal, will not go away. I was very grateful to the fact that the committee came up with so many constructive recommendations. I really think we need to get on and implement them. One observation was they didn't want confusion on duplication and additional complexity. But my view is that the number of times we have now referenced sustainable development in different pieces of legislation since this Parliament was established, actually having a definition on the face of this bill would give us clarity and guidance. And I think Patrick Harvey's comments about the commencement of the establishment of a commissioner was actually a very clever set of thoughts, very constructive. You could pass this, have a commencement date that would enable you to link in with the review on the National Performance Framework. Absolutely. I don't think that's going to happen this evening. There were comments about Wales, and one of the things that has been evidenced is the change of culture delivered in Welsh public bodies by having the Commissioner holding people to account. We're coming to the end of this session, and we need to be thinking about not just the current population of Scotland, but our legacy to future generations. And that was a key ambition of the stakeholders that I've been working with, such as Carnegie, such as the Scottish International Development Alliance, Oxfam and We All, and a whole host of other organisations and individuals. I still strongly believe we should progress my bill to stage 2. It's not long. We could strengthen the bill, pick up on the points that have been made both in the chamber today, but in the evidence. We don't want to fall behind other legislators. And I know there's not going to be enough support across the chamber today. So let me finish on this point. I strongly support the committee recommendation that consideration be given to a Commission 7 committee responsible for future generations, sustainable development and intergenerational equity. That's really important. And to leave the question of how the SBCB will deliver the accountability and oversight that those consulted supported. I think we need answers to those questions. I'll finish by just thanking colleagues for their positive comments. Presiding officer, I'm not standing again in May, but I can tell you now, I will not stop campaigning. So if this bill doesn't go through tonight, and even when we finally get the National Performance Framework consultation from the Minister, I will be giving my views and I will be picking up the fantastic contributions we had in support of my bill, because the issues are not going away. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Boyack. That concludes the debate on the Wellbeing and Sustainable Development Scotland Bill at stage 1, and there will be a short pause before we move on to the next item of business.